All right, welcome back. Last time we talked about dihybrid crosses, and now we're going to go on to a little bit of more complex inheritance that extends beyond what Mendel studied. So Mendel, he worked with pea plants. He did monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. But much more was learned about inheritance after Mendel's time and after his experiments. So this takes us into some more unique patterns of inheritance that Mendel himself did not study. So Mendel, he worked with a very simple system. He was looking at traits that were, the flowers were one color or another. They were tall or short. It was a very simple system, and a lot of different genes and traits don't work that way. They're not quite as simple. So relationships between genotypes and phenotypes, so difference between the genes that you have and therefore what you look like or your physical appearance, they're more complex than that. So especially in humans, a lot of traits are much more complex than, you're either tall or short. It doesn't work that way. It's not you either have there's a range of different traits you can inherit. It's not you're not tall or short. You can be anywhere in the middle. So it's much more complex, and we're going to talk about a few of those different types of inheritance here today. The first one we're going to look at is going to be called incomplete dominance. Incomplete dominance, what it essentially means is that one color, in this case we're going to look at color, one trait or color tried to cover up the other, but it was incomplete. It wasn't successful, and this is going to end up looking like a mixed phenotype. So it's going to look like when one is red flower, one is a white flower, but in incomplete dominance, the two mix to make a blended phenotype. So in this case, big R would represent red, little r would represent white. But if you had a big R and a little r, it would be a mix and would appear pink. So in incomplete dominance, any organism that is heterozygous, meaning they have one of each letter, big R, little r, they're going to have a third trait, which is going to be a mix between the two. So in flowers, in carnations specifically, having two big R's would make a flower red. Having two little r's would make the flower white. But the heterozygous flower, the one with the big R and the little r, the color would be mixed and would appear pink. So we're going to look at what this would look like in a cross. So we're going to have a red and a white. And then we're also going to mix a pink with a pink. So whenever we're working with incomplete dominance, I always am all for making a key. So in this case, we know that big R represents red for the flower. Big R, little r would appear pink. And little r would appear white. So always make key. Now I'm going to mix a red flower and a white flower. So my red flower, red is going to be big R. And my white flower is going to be a little r. Now these are going to look very much like monohybrid crosses. We're having our small boxes. We separate out our letters. The only difference is going to be in the phenotypes and what we're looking at in the end and what the flowers look like. So this box, I would have big R, little r. Here I would have big R, little r, big R, little r, big R, little r. And what this shows is that all of the offspring from this cross are big R, little r. Therefore, they are all pink in color. All right, so now I'm going to do the same type of cross, except this time I'm going to look at two pink flowers. So over here, I know that pink is big R, little r. So parent 1 is pink, big R, little r. Parent 2 is pink, which is also big R, little r. And I'm going to fill in this cross. Now I'm going to look at the genotypes and phenotypes. So I have how many big R's? I have 1, and I know that big R is going to be red. How many big R, little r's do I have? I have 2, and I know that that's going to be pink. In this case, I also have little r. I have 1, and that flower is going to be white. So here, I know that there's a 25% chance that the flower is going to be red, a 50% chance that the flower will be pink, and a 25% chance that the flower will be white. Again, this is incomplete dominance, which looks like mixing. Okay, so that was incomplete dominance. Now we're going to talk about codominance. In codominance, both alleles are expressed equally because codominance means that both alleles are dominant. And if both are dominant, this is going to look like spots. You see both. So spots, or you're going to have both color hairs. You're going to see both. You're going to see both colors if we're looking at colors. So in this case, this one's looking at chickens, a black chicken and a white chicken. And that's going to make a speckled chicken or spotted chicken. Same thing with cows. You have one color cow, another color cow. They come together and they can make a cow with both colors, where you see both. So this would be representative of, I know in the springtime there are flowers that are purple and white spots. They're purple and white. That would be codominant. You see both colors. So in this case, you see both colors. So our example here is with cattle, so cows. And it said that big R is going to represent red hair. WW is going to represent white hair. And RW means red and white, or I'm just going to put spots. One thing that I do want to point out here is that in this case, we are using two different letters. When we're looking at codominance, they're both dominant. I can't use the same letter and have them be capital. So there is no different capital, A. The only way to represent both being dominant and using the capitalization means I have to use different letters. So it's okay to use different letters for codominance, but only in codominance you can use separate letters. I know that some notations also use it for incomplete dominance, but that just confuses me a little bit because dominant means capital, and they're not both dominant and incomplete. So in codominance, we're going to be using two different letters. So when I make my key to the side, I'm going to have big R represents red. We said WW represents white. And an organism that has both, which would be an R and a W, that's going to be spotted. So I always like to make myself a key. It makes it a little easier for myself. It also noted here that if the offspring has two colors, red and white, it's also known as rowan. So just don't get confused by that here. We're going to have a rowan means capital lowercase. So we have two squares. I'm going to ignore what this says here and do my own. I'm going to cross a red and a white for square 1. So a red cow would be RR. A white cow would be WW. So I'm going to fill it out. Now, you might ask, how do I know which letter to put first, R or W? It doesn't really matter. You can put R or W first. I could write WR. Just keep it consistent. Typically, I just go alphabetical order. If it comes first in the alphabet, that's just how I write it. So here we note that all of the organisms, the offspring in this cross, are going to be RW, meaning that all the organisms are going to have spots or be considered Rowan. Just a special word that they use for cows. Cross number 2, I'm going to do 2 Rowan cows. I'm going to cross 2 Rowan cows. So Rowan is RW. Both cows are RW. I'm going to go ahead and fill this out. And I'm going to figure out what my genotypes and phenotypes are. So I know that RR means red. And I have one that's red, which is 25% chance it's going to be that color. RW, I know, is Rowan or spotted. And there's a 50% chance of it being spotted because I have 2 of those. And my last one that I could have is WW, which is going to represent white. And I have a 25% chance that the offspring cow is going to be white. And that's how you would go about doing codominance. Now, there's one other notation that I want to let you guys be aware of so it doesn't confuse you, or so that you are not surprised by it. Sometimes when using codominance, there will be another notation that is used. If we were looking at flower color, there might be a weird notation where they would say the flower on the plant, so F standing for the flower. The flower on the plant is red, and the R would stand for red. And then you have this weird notation where you have a superscript, where you have F superscript R, meaning the allele for the flower color is red. So if you come across something where you're looking at a genotype being written like this, you can ignore the F's and just write it as big R, big R. It's the same thing, so if having the F with a superscript confuses you, just completely ignore the F. So I'm going to draw a square. We're going to do a square, and we're going to do it both ways. So we're going to do codominance, meaning we have 3 different combinations. We're going to cross a red flower and a white flower. So I'm going to cross a red with a white. So I know that red would have 2 R's, so I'd have F big R, F big R. That would be red. White would have 2 W's, so if the flower had a white flowers, be white. Or the flower could be spotted, so it would have an R and a W, and it'd be spotted. So that's my key. Now I'm going to cross a red and a white. A red flower would be F big R, F big R. My white flower would be FW, FW. My cross is going to look the same as far as how I fill it out. So this is one way that I could fill it out, just like I listed here. But if that confused you, again, you just ignore the F's. So when I made my key, I would say RR is red, WW, white, RW, spots. When I filled out my cross, my red flower would be RR. My white flower would be WW. And I fill it out just like I typically would. And I just ignore the F's. So if you get a problem where you see these letters, like with the superscripts, only look at the one up top. You don't need to worry about the big letter, just the superscript. And in this case, because I have all RWs, all of these are going to be spotted. So again, you can use either way. Both are the same. So if you look at these two squares that I have, if you took all the F's out, both of these would be the same square. They look the same if you take away the F's. So don't let that part confuse you. All right, so now we're going to get to something interesting. I think it's interesting. Typically, students think it's interesting as well. And that's when we're looking at blood types. So blood types are kind of unique because blood types, they have 3 different alleles. So they have multiple alleles, meaning it's not, if we're looking at codominance, it's not like there are 2 different alleles. There are actually 3, meaning there's 3 different letters, which is kind of cool. So with blood type, you have 2 alleles that are going to affect the phenotype, but they affect the phenotype equally and separately because you see both. So there's no blend, you see both. And blood type is going to use that weird notation that we talked about using the letter I. So you may know that you can have several different blood types. They're listed here, A, B, AB, or O. And the different alleles for blood type are represented right here. So an I with the superscript A is going to be the allele for an A. I with the superscript B is going to be the allele for B. And then a lowercase I is going to represent the blood type O. The reason this is because A and B are codominant, so they're both dominant, but O is recessive. Therefore, it is represented with a lowercase I. So you could use the I notation, or you could just use typical letters. So when we're looking at genotypes, I'll use the I for the genotypes. When we're looking at the genotypes, people that have blood type A could have 2 different genotypes. They could either have 2 copies of A, or they could have 1 copy of A and 1 copy of O, because O is recessive. So meaning if you have an A and an O, the A covers up the O, therefore your blood type is A. Same thing for B. People with blood type B could have 2 copies of B, or they could have a copy of a B and an O, because the B would cover up the O. People with blood type AB, they're going to have 1 A and 1 B. These are the only genotype they can have. And people with blood type O are going to have 2 alleles that code for O, and that's the only genotype they could have. And blood type brings up a lot of interesting things. One thing that we're first going to talk about is when a person needs blood. So say that you're injured, or someone is injured and they need blood. 2 things can happen. You could either need blood, or you could either give blood to someone who needs it. If you're blood type A, you could donate your blood to anyone that has the letter A. So if anyone has an A, then the A blood type can donate to them. So they could donate to people with blood type A, or to people with blood type AB, because people with blood type AB have an A, meaning they can accept an A. But one thing to know about blood types is A's and B's do not mix. So if I have blood type A, I cannot get blood from someone with B, or I would get sick. So the only way that you could get blood from a person that is AB is if you yourself are AB, which is kind of interesting. So let's finish up with type A. So if you have blood type A, you could either have 2 copies of A or an A and an O, because A covers up the O. A is dominant over O. If you have blood type A, you can give your blood to anybody that has an A. So you could give to someone who is A blood type or someone that is AB, because the AB person has an A. Now, if you were to get sick and you needed blood, you can only get blood from someone who is A or someone who is O. O's can give to everybody because it's recessive. So O's can give to anybody because it's recessive. But because you have blood type A, you can only get blood from people that also have a letter A or the letter O. If you have blood type B, you can have either 2 copies of B or a B and an O to be blood type B. You can give your blood to anybody that also has the letter B. So you can give your blood to anybody with B blood or AB blood because they have Bs. Now, if you needed blood, you can only get it from people who have B or O. The reason you can't get an A from AB is because you have B, not A. If you got the type A, if you got a letter A, you would get sick. So that would not work. If you are type AB, you can only give to people that are AB. Because you have an A and a B, if the other person doesn't also have an A and a B, they'll get sick. However, if you have blood type AB, you can get blood from anybody, because a person with A can give to you because you have an A, and people with B can give to you because you have a B, people with AB can give to you because you have an A and a B, and people with O can give to you because O is recessive. Everybody can get O. So you're in luck if you ever need blood. People with blood type O, the only combination of alleles they can have is 2 O's, because O is recessive. People with type O can donate to anyone. So if you're all in those medical shows, Grey's Anatomy and whatnot, they always say bring in the O neg or whatever for the blood, and that's because people with type O can give to anyone. So in any type of emergency situation, they're going to give you blood type O because they don't know what blood type you are and they don't want to make you sick. But O can be given to everyone. However, if you are blood type O and you need blood, you can only get blood from people that are also O. Anybody that has a letter will make you sick. So anybody that has blood with a letter would make you sick. So you can only get blood from people who are type O. So that's one way we can use blood type. Information about blood type can also be used to figure out paternity, so baby daddy situations. Now, just know that blood type cannot always work because sometimes there's not but so much uniqueness in this. So blood type can't 100% determine if someone's a father, but in certain cases it can narrow down based on the blood type of the mother and the father and the type of child they can make. So blood type is always going to be a monohybrid cross, so you only need one little square. Mom is type A. So the thing says mom is type A. The child is type B. She says Bert is the father. Bert has O. So we can fill out a square here. We know that possible dad, question mark Bert, is type O, meaning that he only has 2 alleles for O. Okay. Mom is A. Now we know that mom could either have 2 A's or an A and an O. So we don't know which one she has here. It's either an A or an O. We don't know. Well, I can fill this square out the best of my abilities. Here it's either going to be AO or OO. We don't know. Same here. However, the child is B. Do we see a B in any of the possibilities? Sorry, Bert. Bert is not the father. The father had to have a B. Bert don't got a B. Bert's not the father. All right, so that is incomplete dominance, codominance, and blood types. There's going to be practice on Canvas for you to go through and practice